Welcome to Fire TV Channel's Bracket Breakdown. We are wrapping up a series of shows we brought you throughout the NCAA Women's Basketball Tournament. You can find every episode of Bracket Breakdown on Fire TV and Echo Show devices simply by asking Alexa, watch Bracket Breakdown. I'm Kylen Mills. Alongside me is WNBA forward and former UCLA Bruin, my Big Ten girlie, Monique Billings, host of the Women's Hoops Show, Jordan Robinson, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and founder of the Next, Howard Megdal. Then joining us in just a bit will be Tenitra Batiste, the national host for the Locked On Podcast Network. We are counting down to the Final Four tipping off in Tampa this weekend. So many elite squads going to be going toe-to-toe. UCLA, UConn, South Carolina, and Texas, the four schools looking to bring home some hardware. Let's focus on the Gamecocks and Longhorns on today's show. Two number one seeds in a battle of the SEC in South Carolina and Texas. The Gamecocks did beat the Longhorns 2 out of 3 times they met this season, including a rout in the SEC Tournament Championship. However, South Carolina has looked very beatable based on the way they played this NCAA tournament, which begs the question, Mo, how focused is this Gamecock squad?
Oh, great question. I mean, they just haven't looked like the same South Carolina team that we're used to seeing. I feel like they're matching the energy of their opponents rather than setting the tone. That's what I'm at least used to seeing. How focused they are, I'm not sure. But I actually laughed when I saw on social media rapper Plies bringing up their focus and saying, y'all need to get off social media. Stop posting. Stop spending all your time on social media. You need to be in the gym. As a player myself, that sounds like shut up and dribble. So I wasn't really a fan of hearing that.
Okay.
Because, yes, South Carolina can play better. They could be a little bit more focused, but I'm all about balance. It's all about balance. Get your work done, but at the same time, like, have fun. And so their counter to Plies was, we're going to post more on social media. The TikTok flooded our timelines. I'm not mad at it.
I'm just glad you guys filled me in on who Plies is. Yeah. I'm not going to lie. I am not up to speed in the hip-hop scene and apparently pop culture either.
He's a big South Carolina women's basketball
fan.
fan.
As someone who followed women's basketball all season, I'm like, I don't know how I missed this. But apparently I missed a big-time storyline. Jordan, you told me, though, that you feel like this game isn't going to come down to any schemes, any specific game plans. What is it that you think will be the deciding factor between Texas and South Carolina?
When you play someone 4 times, and this is your 4th time playing it, it's not about the X's and O's almost. It is about who wants it more. And when we're talking about focus and we're challenging South Carolina to make sure to be that aggressor, they have to be the tougher team. And they were for their 2 wins. In that 1 loss, they weren't. So now is it going to be Texas that's going to try to even the playing field? Or is South Carolina going to say, we have beat this team before, we can do it again by being the aggressor, by coming out strong. It's going to be the little things. It's not going to be this huge, they'll overhaul their whole offense or defense. Right. They know each other very, very well, maybe too well. And that's what it's going to come down to, the little things.
That lack of intensity is what all of us identified in these last couple NCAA tournament games has been the issue for South Carolina. They barely escape against Duke. They barely escape against Maryland. Even in the second round against Indiana, they were down at the half and had to have some kind of crazy Dawn Staley halftime speech just to get to the Sweet 16. So clearly something is missing when it comes to the focus for this team. Howard, outside of that, what are you watching for from the Gamecocks in this matchup against the Longhorns?
Well, really similar to what Jordan said, it almost feels like a WNBA playoff series that you've covered in the past. To see now it's effectively game 4, and it reminds me a lot of what we just saw between the Liberty and the Lynx in the last WNBA finals, where by the time you got to games 4 and 5, they were lower scoring. Everyone knew everyone else's dance moves. And so figuring out exactly where they were going to be on the court, what they were going to do offensively, as Jordan said, like, it's not as much about coming up with a new scheme. It's about figuring out how to execute at the margins. And just to that point, these are 2 top 10 defensive efficiency teams in the country. Texas has been punching first. South Carolina has not. South Carolina's gotten away with it. It's real hard when you fall in a hole against a Vic Schaefer defense to come back and ultimately prevail. So that's real important to Monique's point.
And adding to what you're saying, Howard, my rookie year played in the semifinals in the WNBA, and that series felt so mundane after a certain amount of games, but it's just a level of focus that you have to tap into. You can't get bored of doing the little details, the small things that might not show up on a stat sheet, might feel boring, monotonous, but those are the things that are key to winning big games like that.
Yeah.
To Howard's point that both defenses know the other players' tendencies, I feel like that's an area where South Carolina could have the edge because they have been so collective in terms of their scoring and their offense. They've got a lot of different players who can score, 6 in fact, who average between 8 and 13 points per game. South Carolina's 2 leading scorers have been coming in off the bench, and Joyce Edwards and Malaysia Full-Wiley. Is there anyone else that could be an X factor in this game in your eyes, Jordan?
I think it's Tessa time. I think it's time for Tessa Johnson. Last year in the championship game, as a freshman, she was able to put everyone on notice how she can show up in big games. I think it's her time. She had 0 points against Duke. She's been in foul trouble so far in the tournament, getting a little frustrated coming off the bench. I think she's going to be able to lock in, especially if she can get those shots, letting them fly from beyond the arc. Their whole team is going to get excited and get confident from her knocking down those shots. So it's Tessa time, mark my word.
And if I'm Tessa, I'm going back and watching film from last tournament.
Yes,
She was a huge X factor, so she needs to bring that energy, watch that film.
Can we get Tessa time like on a t-shirt?
Yeah.
Or something? I just feel like
Sponsored.
that's such a great catchphrase. You need to get that a bumper sticker.
And NIL waiting to happen.
I know, right?
Yeah,
I know, right?
100%. I think it's a great point you bring up, though. She struggled during these last couple games in the NCAA tournament. Prior to that, was playing extremely well, though. Johnson had 4 straight games with 9 or more points, 3 straight in double figures. Where did that go? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, 14 points off the bench against Texas in that SEC title game. So she knows that she can do it. I think it's a little bit of calming down. When you're coming in off the bench, and especially when she was having foul trouble, she was trying to get her shots so quick. She didn't know how much time she had on the court. Taking a breath, slowing down, remembering what got you here, that's what she's going to need to tap into.
Mo, you touched on that you've been in the situation where you're playing a team 4 times in a season, so you know the other's tendencies. What does a game like this come down to then? If you feel like maybe the scout is the scout, you know it at this point, is it winning individual battles? Is it some of the hustle plays that you pointed out?
I think it's all of that, and I think it's simply executing and being efficient. That might sound so simple to some, but it's just those simple things.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you guys? Do you feel like there's any 1 or 2 factors that could decide this game?
I think the point you made was such an interesting one because it can go in both directions.
Yeah.
South Carolina has more folks who can come through in a critical moment. It could be Tessa time, to Jordan's point.
Yeah.
But also, when you have a Madison Booker, when you have a go-to, Texas has an understanding of what it will take. And by the way, Texas needs Madison Booker to be that player. When she scored 10 points in the 2 losses, Texas couldn't prevail. When she scored 20, that was the game in which Texas beat South Carolina. She needs to be the best scorer on the floor for Texas to win.
Here's my counterpoint to that, though. Texas's offense is a little bit more one-dimensional. They rely so heavily on scoring inside the paint. In fact, 60% of their baskets come inside the paint versus a South Carolina team that has been developing the outside shot the last couple of years under Dawn Staley. Yes, they still have dominant posts, but they have been hitting the 3 ball at a higher rate. Texas, last in the country in 3-point rate, went only 1 of 8 in their early March meeting against the South Carolina squad. So I guess my question is the offense diversified enough for the Texas Longhorns? Even though, yes, you have the go-to player, but Booker's not a player who's going to be firing a bunch of threes. And if South Carolina packs the paint, what's the answer for Texas?
It's got to be just enough. You know, they don't get away from their game, but Madison Booker is a capable 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
And so I think you need to see just enough. Texas doesn't need 10 threes to win. They don't need 15 threes to win. They probably do need 5.
Okay,
And
so
I
that's the
imagine
threshold.
South Carolina coming into this game sagging. They're going to make Texas shoot those shots.
Yeah.
They're going to be open. So the Texas players need to be confident in shooting that shot. We saw that yesterday. I'll let you speak to Rory Harmon.
Yeah. Well, Rory, I think she hit 1 of the 2 threes that they made in their last
There were
game.
2 in
The
total.
confidence, though. Her
The
just
confidence.
stepping up and shooting that.
And being able to be a point guard, totally biased as the tiny one of the group. I was the point guard, and they set the tone. You have to set the tone. It's going to be Raven Johnson versus Rory Harmon, and this is going to be, like I said, it's going to be ugly. It's going to be scrappy. These teams know each other, so can the point guards make sure to get everybody in line? If they're switching to zone, if they're switching to man, whatever the defense is, they make sure that everyone is in line. I think Rory has to be that for Texas.
I'm down with what Mo said, though. If South Carolina is packing the paint, you expect them to sag. Texas players have to be ready. The guards have to be super confident in taking your shot and believing that it'll go down, right? Like, I feel like that's a lot of what it comes down to. Yes, also the mechanics and everything that go with it, but like going confident.
Go in confident, but don't shoot your team out the game. It's
Yeah, that's fair.
There's a balance between it, but if you're open, shoot that shot.
Yeah, all right, there we go.
I do have to just add,
Yeah.
Monique knows of what she speaks. In that game 4 of that playoff series of rookie season, I just went back because I remember I've covered that game. 11 points in 17 minutes.
Woo!
She went out there and she showed it. She got to the line 11 times, so she brought their confidence.
I love that.
On the road.
I appreciate you, Howard. Thank you.
With the quick thing.
Give Mo her flowers.
That's right.
Howard, Mo's going to be calling you up.
Sure am. My new
But she
bestie,
needs a
y'all.
little confidence booster. Hey, Howard, can you tell me about a game you covered of mine? Yeah, throw some stats at me. That's great stuff. I can't believe you just looked that up while we were here on the show. That is ridiculous.
I remembered covering it live, so I wanted to make sure my memory was correct.
Well, there you go. Also sharp as a tack you are down there. Excellent work. All right, we got to bring in another perspective on the issue. So let's hear from Locked On Women's Basketball contributor Rob Knox, who is with our own Tenitra.
So, Rob, Dawn Staley has instilled a mentality that this South Carolina team will play to the double zeros. They're going to make fewer mistakes when it matters most. But how can the Gamecocks be that aspect of themselves? You know, the slow starts, the cardiac comebacks that we seem to have seen throughout this tournament, and still beat Texas?
They just have a belief. South Carolina, they know it's 40 minutes. They know during the 40 minutes, because of the experience, they're going to have laws. They're going to struggle. They're going to, face some adversity. Basketball's a game of runs. And I think Dawn is just so patient and confident in her team. And they have players that make winning plays when it matters the most. I mean, obviously, South Carolina is going to, always look polished or like the most perfect version of how you envision basketball to be played. But at the end of the day, when you look up, they have more points than the other team. And, obviously in March and now April, that's all that matters.
Yeah, and you look back to last year. I think we forget that there were some close calls last season, and the South Carolina team was able to prevail. How do they pull back from that experience and say, hey, like you said, we've seen it before, so we can believe that we can do it again?
Well, I mean, obviously 2 words. Raven Johnson she's the leader of the South Carolina program, of the South Carolina team. You look at Raven, and obviously, her stats will never jump off the screen at you. But Raven, what she does, I mean, she provides that leadership, she provides that calm, she provides the intangibles that every successful team needs. So again, when they trail, and I mean, fortunately this year they've had the experience of trailing at half, even though it was 1 point against Indiana, and they came out and took control in the third quarter. They faced a fourth quarter deficit late against Maryland. They faced a fourth quarter deficit against Duke and were able to, again, make winning plays down the stretch. And Raven was in the middle of all of that. So I think that, South Carolina, they always do a good job of drawing on their experience. And again, the one thing I remember Dawn Staley last year in the championship game when Iowa went out 10-0 and Caitlin Clark was hitting shots from all over the place.
Yeah.
And the building was going crazy. Everybody's going crazy. And I just looked down at Dawn, and she's just standing there. And most coaches, I know if I was coaching the team, I'd call a timeout and jump on the team and everything like that. And I think Dawn picks her spots because she really understands her team. She really knows her team. And I think the fortunate thing for South Carolina, I mean, obviously you would prefer not to play a team a fourth time.
Sure.
Is that they know Texas. So so I think that it's a good matchup for South Carolina. So I think that's always a good thing.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, having that championship pedigree and believing in that pedigree certainly helps a lot. But let's go back to Raven Johnson. Raven said Dawn Staley told her to just go out and get that win, and ultimately that's how they were able to overcome the deficit and beat Duke. So looking back at that, great, but you mentioned it, we haven't quite seen the Raven of old, the Raven from last season who literally was locking down everyone, or even I'll take you back to my days of watching her back in her days at Westlake High. But ultimately, you do have Malaysia Fulwali, you have Tessa Johnson, you have Joyce Edwards, aka the daycare. So if for some reason your veterans don't quite have it going, how does the daycare get it done?
It's really interesting. They play so free. You look at Fulwali against Maryland. Maryland had zero answer for her, right? So she was able to come in and control the game and get South Carolina back into the game. And I'll say this, I think that what happened against the Maryland game, when they were down 7, I thought Merlin took some tough shots. He missed a few chippies under the basket, and they weren't able to balance the floor. So for a while, he was able to go sprint to the other end of the floor, get in transition, get layups, pass the pow, and next thing you know, you look up and South Carolina's up 2 going into the fourth quarter. I think they just have a phenomenal job of just reading the game, just reading the moment, and everybody delivers when it's their moment. And again, I think that it's just something just inherent in this team and in this program. Obviously, it starts at the top, but I mean, South Carolina is very impressive. And I know there's chatter out there, or they haven't looked good, they haven't been impressive, this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
But I think people always forget in March you're playing other good teams, right? So there's always so the teams you're playing are good.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not going to be as easy to win by 15, 20 points and, look beautiful doing it.
Right.
You're going to have to get your nails dirty. You're going to have to get your hair, out of place. You're going to maybe lose a lash or something like that. But, at the end of the day, if you have more points than the other team, you get to keep playing.
Yeah, I don't think they care about losing a lash if they get to cut some nets. Thank you so much for joining us again, Rob. Appreciate the time.
Always a pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you. Back to you guys.
Thanks so much. All right, we've talked a lot about the Gamecocks. We talked a little bit about the Longhorns, but I do want to expand upon some of the strengths that Howard was just pointing out about Texas and Madison Booker. Do you feel like Booker gives this Texas team the edge, Howard?
I do. And Booker, remember, was a 31% three-point shooter last year. She's at 41 this year. I mean, she has really expanded her game outward. I've talked to her about this earlier this year. That was very much by design, her idea of becoming a true three-level scorer. She has become that. I think in Madison Booker, in this moment, we have a chance to see somebody build a legacy. If Texas is able to win this game in this time, it's going to be in large part because of Madison Booker. And when we talk about her career, looking back on it, it's going to be the game that helps define what she was able to be as a player.
Here's the thing for Booker. In the 2 losses to South Carolina this season, she had a combined 17 points, shot 7 of 32 from the field, less than 22%. And that wasn't the 3-ball. She was struggling to score maybe on the inside because of the way South Carolina can defend the paint. Is there anything you saw from her in those games, Howard, that she can try to tweak so that Booker is more effective this time around against the Gamecocks?
Yes, and something Monique pointed out to me. It's about shot selection. And it's something that, to my mind, somebody as a sophomore, well, now you are practically in your junior season. And I want to see not only what shots she's making, but where she's getting her shots to begin with. That's going to be really telling to me early. I thought in the Elite Eight game, she did not force it early on. In fact, Rory Harmon, and we talked about this, took advantage of a defensive matchup to her advantage. Madison Booker waited back, found where she could get her shots, and ultimately had a team high in points. She's going to need to do something similar. She doesn't have to force the action to get the amount of production she's going to need for Texas to beat South Carolina.
Right, and the production level is also relative to how good Texas's defense is, one of the best defenses in the country. So she doesn't have to do everything. Don't go outside of your game, but she is averaging 16.5 points per game. You'd like to see her get into double figures. Like, what do you feel like is the threshold, Jordan, in terms of what Booker needs to do to help set up the team for success in this game?
I'm so happy you brought up defense because I feel like we're talking a lot about offense.
We are.
Teams
You're right.
that
You're
are
right.
very, very defensive focused
true.
and defensive minded. So that's what I was going to say. That's going to fuel their offense. When Texas came out against TCU, they had them sped up. They had them going around in circles, throwing the ball out of bounds. And that's what set their tone. That's how Rory Harmon was able to get off to that fast start. They're going to look to do that again. It's not as easy to do that against a South Carolina team, but that's what their identity is. That's what their anchor is in. So I can see the offense coming, but the defense is going to set the tone.
Rory Harmon running the point, I do want to mention, I feel like has opened up Booker's game as well compared to a season ago. Rory Harmon out with an ACL injury. I just think it makes such a huge difference to have Booker off ball where she had to step into a position last year that maybe she wasn't totally comfortable in running the point. Harmon also did have a really nice game against TCU. 13 points, just a couple boards, but 5 assists. And she's a player who can really be creative and use her length as well to help get this offense going. Monique, what are you watching for from Texas?
Well, we talk about their defense. Their defense is so good. One thing that kind of bothered me in the game against TCU is their lack of rebounding, and maybe that's just a want, but TCU was all over the offensive rebounding. And you think about Texas playing defense for so long throughout the shot clock, playing phenomenal defense, and then not securing the rebound at the end of the shot clock. That's tough. That is so deflating to play against. There were spurts in that game where TCU got maybe 3 to 4 offensive rebounds within a play. So they're going to need to do a great job securing rebounds. South Carolina is a great rebounding team.
These are both great defensive teams. These are both efficient offensive teams, both among the nation's top 20 just in terms of field goal percentage. How much could the pace affect this game, Jordan, and what kind of pace do both of these teams want to play at?
I think it's going to be fast.
Okay, we like fast.
We
Let's go.
like
Bring
fast.
it. Run the floor,
That's
lady.
what gets me so excited. I think this is going to be such a great matchup. Again, they know each other, so they are going to try to speed each other up, make it an ugly, murky game. I will say, these past couple games for South Carolina, they have been low scoring. They have been uglier games. I know that Duke wanted to play that type of game, but they've still come out on top. They've still been able to win. I know we've been a little critical on South Carolina, but they're winning. They're still getting by, barely. So this is something that they wanted to be a little bit ugly. They wanted to murk it up. But if they can still have confidence and calmness and poise down the stretch, then I have South Carolina coming out on top.
Okay, interesting. You're
I'm
already going to get
getting ahead. I'm getting ahead. Sorry.
You're getting ahead of yourself here. But I love it. Just put it all out there. Here's the thing. I feel like when we're talking about these Final Four matchups, UConn and UCLA have gotten so much hype. I feel like there's a lot of people expecting the national champion to come out of that side of this Final Four bracket. But who's to say South Carolina, the defending national champions, doesn't run it back? Well, yes, they've been surviving. They're in the Final Four without playing their best basketball. Mo, do you feel like they're being overlooked a little bit?
I don't know if they're being overlooked, but I do agree with your point because I feel like there's another level for them to get to. There's another expectation. They're not playing their best, which is scary because how do you make it to the Final Four without playing your best basketball?
Yeah, I mean, that's the crazy thing. So we already know who your pick is, Jordan. Spoiler alert. Okay, but if you think that South Carolina makes it out of the Final Four to the national championship, if they're playing a UConn-UCLA, are they going to be competitive and have a chance to win that game? Because I just feel like a lot of people are assuming it's going to be a UCLA or UConn national championship.
I think it is a little bit of how are we disregarding the reigning champ?
Yeah.
They are still the champions until someone knocks them off. And I think they need to be reminded of that a little bit. Like I said, Dawn Staley is there to motivate. She is there to hype you up and she is going to talk big, but she can't get on the court and play for you. And so this South Carolina team needs to be reminded of who they are, how they got here, why they deserve to be that #1 overall seed. That's still a chip on their shoulder. And that needs to tap in at this point.
UCLA UConn may be the sexier matchup, but these are two really deep teams, really good defensive teams. They get an efficient offenses. Howard, you've got your ear to the ground. What's the chatter surrounding this game that you're hearing, and what's your take?
Anyone who is paying close attention knows any of these 4 teams can win the national championship. Period. End of story. You go by any way you evaluate these teams. They were #1 seeds. You go by net rating. These were the top 4 teams in the country. Texas has 8 players playing at least 15 minutes, so they have depth in a way that we have talked about South Carolina does as well. Whoever comes out of this game is going to be a worthy adversary for whoever comes out of UCLA UConn.
I would make the point that these are the 2 better defensive teams out of the teams that are in the Final Four versus UCLA and UConn. And that's not to say they have bad defense, but just both South Carolina and Texas are so physical, so aggressive. So do we believe that offense wins games and defense wins championships, or are we on Gino's side in saying that you've got to have players that can score the basketball to win it all, Mo?
Oh my goodness. I mean, it's both. I'm with you though. I'm a defensive girl.
Yeah,
I get my game going. Yes.
Big Ten girl?
Yes. The defensive end says a lot. Yes, you need to be able to get buckets, but you got to stop buckets as well.
Offense versus defense.
Oh,
Jordan.
Gosh. Well, I don't really like to play defense personally. I want to let that
Truth
fly.
comes out.
I
You
want
want
to
one of
score.
those,
I want to score.
I'm not mad.
Because at the end of the day, what did Dawn Staley say at the beginning of that last game? We need to score 1 more point than the other team.
part.
That's how you win.
Yep.
So yes, it could be 0-1 in the defensive-minded game, but you got to score points to put it on the board. So I'm team offense.
Ultimately, UConn and UCLA play effectively enough defensively that I don't think you have to choose. And I also, to Gino's point, I think that you need to have both in order to win championships. Once you get to this level, it's got to be both sides of the ball. But again, to go back to it, All four of these teams do that. We talked a little bit, you say, we're overlooking defense, and you're right, but because defense is the given, and this is the best offensive team Vic Schaefer has ever had. South Carolina, the defense is a given, but there's so many people who can score the basketball. Same, UCLA has the best rim protector in the country. UConn is once again an elite defensive team. These teams do it all, which is why anyone who thinks we know what's going to happen this weekend is kidding themselves.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
I know, I'm so excited. I mean, it goes back to the conversation we've been having throughout our shows. There was so much parity at the top in NCAA women's basketball. This isn't the South Carolina Cup. This isn't the UConn Championship. This is anybody who comes in and plays better is going to win. And that's why we love to watch. Maybe put our money on some games. I don't know. We'll see. We're willing to throw some dough on it. With that, we'll send it over to Tenitra, who is with Locked On Women's Basketball contributor Wilton Jackson. If you guys want to carry on the conversation or go a different route, Tenitra looks good in pink. That's all I know.
Please and thank you for that. So let's start with good on good. Vic Schaefer and his team's philosophy. It's all about toughness, physicality, intensity. You saw that come into full fruition with that full court press against TCU, cost 21 turnovers. But as good as Texas is at turning the ball over, is as good as South Carolina is at protecting it. So how do the Longhorns win that battle?
I think for Texas, they're going to have to still play good defense, but I think it also comes down to Texas, and I think the main crew just said it. It's going to come down to Madison Booker and her ability to make shots. But I was also talking to Sydney Carter on Texas staff, and she was talking about the way, obviously, that Madison Booker plays the game, not just her shooting, but it's also going to come down to how well does she put her teammates in position to score as well. And you look at a Texas team, and you talk about some of their freshmen that have stepped up in these last two games in Breonna Preston and Jordan Lee. You talk about Texas is not a team that shoots a lot of three-pointers, but Jordan Lee may have to hit a three-pointer to keep this game in a tight situation for Texas if it gets down to that type of situation. And you talk about rebounding in that very first game for Texas against South Carolina. They actually out-rebounded South Carolina on the offensive boards. Now, it went differently for South Carolina. It went differently against South Carolina in some of the other previous matchups, but I think it's definitely going to come down to Madison Booker leading the way, but also getting a strong supporting system from her teammates as well.
Now, this was Texas' fourth regional final in the past 5 years. Longhorns lost in the previous three, with losses to South Carolina in 2021, Stanford in 22, and of course, NC State last season. What's your level of concern that them getting to the Final Four is maybe mission accomplished and is maybe good enough for the Longhorns?
I don't think they're satisfied at all. I had a chance to talk to a lot of the Longhorns players after that game, and you could just tell and looking in their eyes that they're not satisfied at all, starting with Madison Booker, starting with Jacqueline Owen and Tonda, talking to Breonna Preston. They're all eager to continue playing, to continue to play. And you talk about Rory Harmon, right? Her story is just remarkable. Tears her ACL, comes back in 10 months. And this team goes as far as Rory Harmon goes. Her level of defensive intensity, it just pretty much it breeds success within all the rest of her teammates on the court. And so I think that this is a team that is really, really eager to get a chance to get to battle in the Final Four. And you might be surprised what might happen in this outcome in Friday's game.
Interesting take. So what have you seen then since Texas lost to South Carolina in that SEC tournament championship that makes you so confident that this time the Longhorns will get the W and avenge that loss?
Now, I will say this. I didn't necessarily say that they were going to get the W.
A little caveat there, okay.
But I will say this. You're just seeing a lot of continuity amongst their players coming together at the right times. I can assure you, and I think Howard kind of mentioned this, at this point of the season, you're no longer a freshman, right? You're looking at Breonna Preston, and you're looking at players like Jordan Lee. They have stepped up tremendously when Texas has needed them. And even Coach Schaefer has talked about their impact as well. And so while so much of the attention, and even Jordan Lee talked to me about this in the locker room yesterday, so much attention gets put on the Rory Harmons, the Madison Bookers, the Kyla O. Akers, the Taylor Jones. And so when you have these other players on your team that can knock down shots, you're talking about Jordan Lee, that's a McDonald's All-American. And she's hit several threes over these last two games that have really gave an edge to Texas when they really needed it. So I think that when you have a moment where you're going to get your Madison Booker, we know that as long as she continues to score efficiently, she's going to get her points, she's going to get her shots. But I think the biggest difference maker for Texas is, number one, can they continue to defend well like they have been? And how much help will they be able to get from their other supporting cast, specifically those freshmen and some of the other players that are on the court? When you start talking about Taylor Jones, and making sure that Kyla Oaker controls the glass, specifically on the offensive side of the ball.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you so much for your time, Wilton. Appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you.
Yeah. And listen, as much as I hear what Wilton is saying, although he gave me a caveat, I heard that asterisk come on in that last question, right? I appreciate that, and he's right. Rory Harmon is doing her thing, and you can't take away from that. But here's the thing. If we're talking about two teams that are so defensively minded, someone's going to have to step up and make it an offensive game at the end of the day like Jordan wants them to do. So I do think that that's where the difference is going to come in. Maybe that experience that you have from last year. You mentioned it as well, Monique. When I think about a Raven Johnson and what she was able to do, all the stops, putting her on the best players, and she came through last season, I think that's going to come back through. And I do think Donnie Daycare is going to show up. Like, I just really think it's time. Like, Fulwiley, step up. Johnson, step up. Edwards, step up. You can't expect them to once again go 4-14 and just score 9 points. I don't think that happens to a Dawn Staley team twice in a tournament. I just don't. And I think that's going to maybe be that difference. I don't think it's going to be a lot. I think that line being 4.5 is probably where it's going to stay. So I'm going to also stay where I've been. South Carolina. I don't want any smoke from Dawn Staley when she comes to Atlanta in a couple weeks. No smoke.
Tenitra, spoken very, very smartly. You do not want to make an enemy of Dawn Staley unless you're Howard.
Never.
Who was? Just kidding. Who was bringing? You were bringing a little bit of smoke on the Gamecocks in some of our earlier episodes, but it's fair because they have not played their best basketball during the stretch of the NCAA tournament. All right. So who do you guys believe makes it to the national championship game? Is it South Carolina? Is it Texas? As you just heard Tenitra mention, Gamecocks are 4.5-point favorites. What do you got, Mo?
I'm with T. Experience wins. South Carolina's been there multiple times. They've been sneaking out with wins lately, but we haven't seen their best yet. And I see a complete game coming from South Carolina.
I'm going off of that. I'm also going to agree and go South Carolina. Wilton had us in the first half, though. I was like, wow, maybe Texas is going to win. And then he was like, I didn't say that. So I'm going South Carolina. I think we spent all this time, we didn't even talk about Malaysia Fulwiley and what she can do. She did not have a great game the last game. She is going to give us a highlight that we are going to have on repeat all over our social media feeds. I'm going South Carolina.
Okay.
I was proud to see that Wilton covered all bases. We tried to do that the Next and the Locked On Women's Basketball, so I thought he did that well. Ultimately, while a Dawn Staley team, you'd be foolish to bet against them on a regular basis. I've had Texas winning it all since before the bracket began. I think this is Texas's year, and I think they have just enough to prevail in a really close game.
I thought you were about to switch it up, Howard.
No,
From pins and needles.
no, I said you have to be very foolish to do it, and then I did it. So, so there you go.
Exactly. Very foolish. Hook 'em? Are we still doing the hook 'em? I mean, you've been riding Texas since the very first show, since our Selection Sunday show. So to give you some credit, we've all been waiting to give you a hard time, and it hasn't happened. So it's almost like you know what you're talking about.
Well,
I've
I've tried.
covering this sport for decades.
Well, it's true. Ultimately, this Texas team has the look of a champion to me. And I say that, again, to go back to what I said earlier, it would not surprise me if any of the four teams here ultimately win. It's what's going to make this Final Four one to remember, I believe, for many years to come. I think Vic Schaefer has built this team to get that last victory. He's come within one victory. And in 1 year, he came within one shot of doing it. I think this is the year for Texas, for Rory Harmon, and for Madison Booker.
I'm with you actually on this one. I'm going Texas. Yes. Okay.
Welcome.
Hook 'em, baby. Listen, it was all you, Howard. Like, you got me on the Texas train. I was not when we came into this entire NCAA tournament series, but here I am. The Longhorns have a top 20 scoring defense. They also force a ton of turnovers, 21 turnovers per game. So we talked about maybe some of the offensive efficiencies, but if they can turn those turnovers into easy baskets on the other end, get out in transition, that makes things so much easier for their half-court offense, which admittedly does not knock down the three ball well. So I do think that's a big caveat.
Yes.
I'm with you that I think Texas needs to hit like 5 threes in this game, get some transition buckets. If they do that, in addition to playing stifling defense, they just have to score enough. To Dawn Staley's point, you just got to score 1 or 2 more than the opponent. And they've been holding opponents all season long to about 56 points per game.
Yeah.
I believe they can do that against the Gamecocks, at least based on the way South Carolina has been playing as of late. And then they just have to do enough. That's the other part of this issue for me is I feel like we've all been saying week after week, game after game, well, South Carolina Carolina is going to turn it on. They're going to show up. The lights are going to come on. All of a sudden, it's going to be the South Carolina team we were all expecting. But it hasn't happened.
Yeah,
Why you think it's
Now
going
or
to? Yeah,
never.
you're running out of time.
Yeah.
Why would we assume that it's going to happen in a Final Four? So that's my other issue with picking the Gamecocks is the lackluster intensity and some of the effort that we've talked about. Like, I feel like we've all been waiting for them to flip the switch, but it hasn't been flipped. So I just have a hard time believing against one of, if not the best defense in the country, that suddenly the switch is going to come on and that they're all going to start firing on all cylinders. They're going to be diving around the floor. This is going to be this electric style of basketball that's been totally absent for South Carolina. So I might be getting some smoke from Don Staley on that. I don't know. I don't know, Howard. Howard, you're going to protect me, right?
I will. We've got it. And again, you're absolutely right that I am primarily the one who should get credit for Texas's run, but a little bit Madison Booker and Rory Harmon too. I think they should probably get some credit too, don't we think?
That's fair.
Yeah,
And maybe a little Vic.
Yeah.
A little Vic.
Mostly
Vic.
you,
I mean, that's the thing.
Obviously.
Madison Booker, too, she's a mismatch nightmare over a 6-foot guard. She's
Yeah.
long, she's crafty, she's creative. She's starting to knock down the 3 ball at a much higher clip.
Yeah.
That's also a tough matchup, although South Carolina has some really good defenders. I do believe that Madison Booker can get hers in this game. Then some of the others just need to knock down some threes, and I think get out in transition. I think that could be it. You guys, this is goodbye. I'm not well right now, but this is our last show. Mo, how you feeling?
Oh my goodness, this has been amazing. Thank you
so
guys.
fun.
Come to a Valkyries game this season.
Oh,
Oh,
girl,
yeah.
we'll be in the front row.
Yes, of
When can
course.
we order our Billings jerseys?
Ooh,
There
might
might
be online.
Are they online?
All right, I think they might be.
All right, we need to get on that. Okay?
Yes.
We will be getting our jerseys.
Say
We'll
less.
be rocking it. Well, Jordan, it has been a blast.
It has been so much fun, and I'm just so excited. Packing my bags to Tampa, not knowing who's going to win, with all of this in my head, I'm so excited to watch good basketball. So thank you guys for talking
And we'll be
about it.
following the pod, obviously, because
Oh,
you're going to be
yeah.
reporting on all of
Yes,
this, right?
yes. We'll be
for
talking, yapping away.
Yes, exactly. So folks who are watching on more Jordan, you can get all of that as she covers this national champion run, and we'll see who wins the title. Howard, I know you're all over it. The next Locked On Women's Basketball, you're writing books. Is there anything you're not doing besides bringing your golden retriever energy to the set?
I get to see my family a little bit when this is all said and done. But in the meantime,
Who are they? What?
Again, a huge thank you to everyone who at the Next and Locked On Women's Basketball who came and joined
Yes,
us. We
I
do
think that's
this
important.
every single month. We have over 100 reported pieces. Monique, I won't be wearing a jersey for my journalism.
That's okay.
But,
Underneath the suit.
but I will be there, and we will be talking about your games, past, present, and future. And I can't
can't
wait.
wait.
Jordan, I'll be listening to every episode as well. It's been like being on an all-star
And I know
team.
you guys are all going to be tuning into the Big Ten Network next season, right?
As
We are
always.
gassing
Of
up the Big
course.
Ten, even though I don't
Hopefully
get to
we
talk
get to
about
work
any of
together.
my teams in the Final Four. Yes, we're going to be working together. So it's been a heartbreaking finish for me, but it has been a blast working with all of you guys. So excellent work. I look forward to continuing to follow your coverage of the Final Four National Championship game. And of course, you can follow Locked On. You can follow Fire TV channels. There will also be more coverage there as well. That wraps up this Fire TV channel's Bracket Breakdown show, part of a series of shows we brought you throughout the NCAA tournament. You can find every episode of Bracket Breakdown on Fire TV and Echo Show devices simply by asking Alexa, watch Bracket Breakdown. I'm going to be saying that in my sleep for many weeks to come. Well, on behalf of this awesome crew beside me, Monique, Jordan, Howard, Tenitra, our producer, Charlie Walter, executive producer, Ali Bronson, production manager, Brian Levine, and so many more, we thank you so much for joining us. I'm just going to let the credits roll to cover all of the names, but so many people made huge efforts to make this production what it was. Thank you for hanging with us. I'm Kylen Mills. For one last time, we will see you later.